What's up? Hey everybody, still trying to figure out this Instagram thing. So sorry about that. Um, let's see. Sent a request to Chris, and Chris, trying to see if you
Do it.
got it. Oh my goodness gracious. I think we might
Hey,
have
bud.
stuff.
Can you hear me?
Yo, Chris, I can hear you, man.
Excellent.
All right, cool. We're getting somewhere, guys. We're getting somewhere. Sorry, sometimes
Yeah,
Instagram
congrats.
can be a bit of a tricky situation, but it finally let me connect to you.
I'm glad it did.
I'm
Nice to
glad
see you.
it did
How's it
too,
going?
man. How's it going, dude? Welcome
Yeah,
to
it's
the
good. All's well.
great, man. Well, welcome to the age of quarantine. Sorry, guys, that took a little while, but we're finally here with Chris Adler, a fucking phenomenal guitarist, DC guy, born and bred. Just joking. Phenomenal drummerist, as we all know. And so,
The drummer.
welcome to the age of quarantine, the drummerist of all drummerists. Long CV. We got Burn the Priest. We got Lamb of God. We have Firstborn. We've had Songs with Testament. We've had all sorts of collaborations. So, Chris, thank you for joining the show tonight.
Oh man, I'm thrilled. Thanks for asking me to be a part.
Awesome, man. So, through Age of Quarantine, what we like to do is basically just chart everyone's journey from early on to basically present day. So we're going to kind of start from the top. So you're DC born and bred guy, or is that just kind of what, like where the bands and stuff started?
Well, no, the band didn't. Interestingly, well, that's
Richmond.
quite a jump. I was born in DC, and then my dad worked with the government, and so we moved around a little bit. I was in DC until I was, I believe, 3. Then I moved to Albany, New York until I was 6. Then back to Maryland, Upper Marlboro, Maryland, until middle school. Then down to Northern Virginia for middle school and high school, and then came to Richmond, Virginia in 1990 for college at VCU here. I know, it sounds like it almost hurts to say it. But that is where I was in a lot of music stuff prior to that. So not to skip over that, but that's where the band started. So everybody, myself, John, and Mark, just happened to, as luck played out, live on the same floor of the same dorm at school. We didn't know each other prior to that, and just kind of started hanging out and drinking beers and listening to Trouble.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. So let's talk a little bit about your upbringing, because I didn't know how many places you had sort of been. Was it because of your father's job and stuff like that you were kind of bouncing around? Because I'm from New York, so I know Albany is a government town.
Yes, primarily everything. So he was in human resources with the Federal Aviation Administration, and which is kind of, I wouldn't call it quite a military brat upbringing, but we definitely moved around to wherever they needed it.
Got it. So that was basically it. So what was it like kind of just growing up, it seems, when you start moving from town to town? How did you come to just even, knowing that music was a passion, even when you were a really like young kid? What started attracting you to music first, like to give you that gut instinct that like, hey, I really like this?
Oh, wow. I think it was, and I don't mean this to be some like weird emo story or something, but I think it was maybe because of the reason, I haven't really put this together. This is like some sort of therapy for me, but maybe because we moved around so much, I didn't have like a real connected group of friends, and music was just, it was always there. And of course it was first, whatever was on Dad's radio in the car when we were driving wherever. But soon I kind of found my own way. Every once in a while there'd be a song that he'd put on that, I kind of dug or whatever. And, on the radio had some good stuff growing up, but I think music just made me feel like it was a place that I felt a lot of times. Several of the schools that I went to were like an hour away from my house. And so there wasn't like this group of friends. It wasn't like I was going to be hanging out after school. It was like just go home, and it was just kind of me in my room. And of course, there's my little brothers, which was fine. But it was kind of my escape and best friend at the same time.
Ah, Got it. So even from early on, so dad kind of, you know, he'd have some stuff kind of going on, but what was kind of your earliest tastes in music? You know, what was the first stuff that you were kind of getting into that kind of was like, ooh, cool, you know? I know you were kind of in the 70s. For a lot of people, feels like it was maybe Kiss or something like that. Tell me about kind of those early bands that kind of made you want to be a rocker.
I know I'm going to get a lot of hate out of this, but I still to this day cannot stand Kiss. The
That's
thing
cool. I'm not a big
that
fan either, so it's fine.
okay, the thing that got me, I think the first actual vinyl album that I ever bought was Thriller, Michael Jackson,
I love
and
that record.
the very next thing that I got was the very first Aerosmith record. And that has been just a keystone to my life for a very long time. I mean, the songs on that were great for a teenage boy trapped in his room, you know, kind of thinking about things and not really a lot of people to hang out with. And I think, honestly, I hung on to that, and I got really into Foreigner for a long time. And then I think I really took a huge jump, and sometime around probably 1985, got a copy of Peace Sells, and that was just the end of the world.
Got it. And those are really pivotal moments, and that's what I love to talk to people about, like kind of their childhood and stuff like that, because there's these sort of random things that kind of happen that really shape people's lives. How did you kind of come upon that Aerosmith record that you kind of chose for yourself? Is it something you heard on the radio and you liked it, or like how did you come to like acquire it, if you can remember that?
I think it was both Megadeth and Aerosmith shared a moment there. So my brother and I really got into skateboarding for quite a while. In fact, I just got a new longboard today.
Sick.
But interesting little side bit about that was my mother, who worked several jobs and was always around, but at the time, I think maybe I was finishing middle school, maybe I was about to go to high school. She knew that Willie and I were really into skateboarding, and she had gotten us subscribed to Thrasher magazine at the time. And so, you know, I'd go up to my room and listen to my music, and I had all at that point, Aerosmith records and stuff. And, well, maybe I didn't have them all, but she went into those Thrasher magazines, and while she was not employed, while my dad was working, she went into the back and bought the plans to make a ramp, and actually made us a 12-foot with like 18-inch vert ramp in our backyard by herself, like soaked wood. Like, my mom was rad.
Dude, mom of the fucking year. She built you a half pipe like that,
yeah.
like you're like Steve Caballero or something. Maybe that's the right era, right?
Well, right. It became quickly apparent that I was not going to be a particularly good skateboarder, but it was really cool to have the ramp in the backyard. And that definitely drew a lot of attention from the neighborhood kids who I didn't go to school with. So now there were some neighborhood kids hanging out. Now there was a tape trading thing going on. And I think on one of these tapes, there was both SOD and Megadeth. And then there was a different kid that had like Aerosmith and Foreigner and stuff like that. So I just kind of got my first taste of that kind of stuff. And then my first kind of Sony Walkman that looks like, you know, it looks like a submarine at this point, but one of those things that I could take on the school bus, you know, and even when the batteries were running down.
That Walkman probably was like these two beers put together right here, right? Like it's something similar to that. Yeah, actually,
with a real aggressive latch to make sure, I don't know, the tape didn't shoot out and hit somebody or something. I don't know. But yeah, it was yellow. I remember that. But yeah, I'd listen to that stuff. I mean, I would listen on that Walkman. I mean, the batteries would be running dead on the school bus, stuck in traffic or whatever, and I'd still listen to it just, you know, till it was stuck totally dead.
Till it became a doom metal record.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. So that's kind of, I guess, how it all started. And even on those school bus trips or van trips or carpools with mom and dad or whatever, that was always my little kind of look out the window escape.
Awesome. Yeah, that's amazing. And in fact, that's actually very similar to how I got into like heavier music as well, because I watched a lot of skateboarding videos, and they had a bunch of New York hardcore and metal in them, whether it was Jamie Thomas, the Toy Machine, playing Iron Maiden, or it was the 411 video comp. you know, I'm 37, so I'm just pre-internet. Like I was growing up as the internet was, so we share that too, and that's an amazing thing because skateboarding culture on this show, as we're talking about people's lives, really is shaped like, you know, got a lot of people into heavier, cool music. So shout out to all, you know, Thrasher and all the cool, you know, skateboarding culture. So you
and that was a big part of when Nema got started. That was a big part of our thing. Every time we go to Southern California, catching up with guys like Danny Way and DC Shoes guys and all that stuff, that was a huge thing for us because we were all in that same boat where we watched those skate videos and all that stuff and wanted to be able to do that, but hurt ourselves too many times to keep trying.
Yeah, dude, I don't want you jumping out of any helicopters. Let's keep you in behind the kit, like nice and safe for us. So
it might surprise you, but I have actually jumped out of the helicopter.
Look at that. See, I love that. Chris Adler, international man of drumming and mystery here. So let's just talk a little bit about drums, right? So you're a skateboarder at this time. You're getting into all this shit. You're loving this music and stuff. What brought you to that instrument particularly, and like how did that evolution of just wanting to play that happen?
That's it goes back a little further than that, but to start there, when I did start getting into this music, I had already taken, I guess, about 8 years of piano, a lot of singing lessons, and I had moved on to the guitar. And the thing that I loved about all this music that I was listening to, especially Megadeth and SOD, was guitar, and still is. Like, that is by far my favorite instrument. And I spent a lot of time trying to play that. And I ended up playing bass for a very long time. When I came into college, even though I knew these guys, we didn't start the band until about 4 years later. And I played in a couple college bands and played bass. And we had a tour van and went around the country and did some fun stuff, put out 3 records playing bass. And then I went and saw up in Baltimore a place called, I think, Hammerjacks, a band called Wrathchild America. And this dude named Shannon Larkin was playing the drums for them, and he's gone on to great success, and I'm really happy for kind of where he ended up because I know how much of a struggle it is to stay in underground metal stuff. But when I saw him play drums, I think very soon after that, I sold all my bass gear to get a drum kit because I wanted to do what that guy was doing. Like, Shannon Larkin plays the drums better than I can do anything in my entire life, and I just thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen, and I wanted to figure out how to do it. And turns out, now I'm 21, so I had not played drums prior to that, and it turns out I guess I had a knack for it.
Yeah, I'd say so. But and now, because I was frazzled before, I called you a guitarist. Well, guess what? I was right. So fuck all of you. But yeah, so that's pretty amazing though. So what was did like your parents kind of push you into trying musical instruments and playing piano all those years and stuff like that, or how did
my mother was? Yeah, my mother was very musical. She sang in many oratorio societies. She played the piano all the time, and was very encouraging. I wouldn't say pushy at all. She was just encouraging of our creative side, art, music, that kind of stuff. So it was not, it wasn't a struggle for me to ask for piano lessons. It wasn't a struggle for me to say, well, I might like to try and play the guitar. My parents went through whatever it took to get both me and my brother lessons.
That's amazing, man. Shout out to Mom again. I mean, we got the half pipe, we got the lessons popping. We love Mom, damn. So shout out to Adler's mom, because that's amazing, and it's very interesting to see how just people get into stuff too, right? Some people have a musical family. Some people it's like, nah, man, I heard a punk band and I needed to be in that, right? So it's really interesting how people find that sort of point. So up until that, like you were saying, you were kind of like in some smaller bands like Calibra. I read a couple of things before that,
yeah.
Right?
That was my high school, right?
It's a high school band. See, we did a little bit of deep digging, because I can't just fast forward to Burn the Priest as much as like I'd like to, but
right.
This is setting the scene. So let's talk a little bit about Burn the Priest, because when I think I first ever heard you play personally, that was the first band that I ever heard, and I was just like, dude, this is so fucking sick. And I love Vision of Disorder. VOD
that was
like one of
Burn
my
the Priest
favorite
was the first band you've ever heard?
What's up?
You said Burn the Priest was the first band you've ever heard?
No, no. One of the first bands that you played in that I ever
Oh,
heard
okay.
was Burn the Priest.
Good.
So I was just
Good.
like, oh, I love Vision of Disorder. I'm from Long Island and stuff like that. And I felt like you guys were different sounding, but kind of in that mix. So tell me more about Burn the Priest and how it got together.
Wow. So this was, again, so John, Mark, and myself met coming down to college, and became friends, and then went our separate ways after the dorm years. And I guess about 4 years after that, and we had really close friendships, and then kind of friendships that broke up because of girlfriends or whatever, just went our own ways. And I guess about 4 years later in '94, I don't remember if I was actually taking a class with John or ran into John at a building where we both had a class. But we just started talking about old times, hanging out, whatever, asked if we still played music, that kind of thing. And he's like, hey, man, maybe we should get together and make some noise or whatever. And I was like, well, right, but we both play bass. And I was like, but I did just get a drum kit. I'm terrible at it, but, sure, let's see what happens. And so that was really the buds of it. I think that was in like September of '94. And shortly after that, we were playing, basically between eating hot dogs and drinking too much beer, we were playing half of whatever songs we knew and just kind of being nothing else to do, drunk dudes in a house. And he's like, hey, man, you remember Mark? Like, he's playing in this really cool band that's doing really well. I forget the name of it, but they were really, really good. Local band in Richmond. And I was like, yeah, I remember Mark. Mark and I had been good friends. And he's like, oh, let's have him over. Like, I still talk to him. Like, let's jam. And I was really, really hesitant because I was still super woodshedding. Just again, I learned really how to play the drums off that first Aerosmith record. So, and I was still trying to figure that shit out. And I knew Mark was, playing on stage in town, like at the cool bars and whatever. So I was a little hesitant about that, but anyway, John invites him over anyway, and I don't know how happy I was about it at the time, but that is really, I think, what stepped it up for me. It stepped out of me and my buddy making noise and drinking beers and eating hot dogs to like, Jesus Christ, this guy is fucking good, and I don't like being embarrassed. So, man, I put in so much time, like just woodshedding, so that every time, whether it was once a week, twice a week, whatever next time Mark showed up, like I was able to feel a little bit better about either keeping up with him or, catching up to him.
Yeah, so he kind of like pushed the level a little bit. And since you were kind of
absolutely
newer at the instrument and stuff, and like I know about you too, you kind of play a little bit flipped around and stuff like that. Was that like a mother of invention kind of thing? Like, hey, I got this kit. This is the kind of, what I can afford, what I can get. Or tell me about
it. Absolutely was.
That.
Yeah, so the kit that I got was, at the time there was a little whatever 7-Eleven kind of paper called the Trading Post, and that I found this like cheap drum kit. I think it was like $250, and I had played in all these bands before, so I knew how to set up a drum kit, but I never once was smart enough to think maybe I should do it the other way since I'm left-handed. So I just set it up like all the other drummers had, and I know speaking to a lot of drummers, there's certainly a difficulty in switching that kind of thing up. But I kind of started the process that way, not knowing a different way. And I think that did add a lot of different creative elements to it that I'm not even entirely aware of until somebody points it out to me. Like, how did you do that? Here's my cat.
Yo, shout out to the cat, man. Hell yeah. Love that. But yeah, that's amazing though, because to me, I think there's always something really cool about not knowing what the fuck you're doing, but having like the passion and intensity to want to do it, right? Like if you always knew what you wanted in such a clear way, there'd be kind of no struggle and breakthroughs and really kind of coming on to maybe things that created your style. So that's why I was like, man, he plays all switched up like this. Why didn't he set it up the other way? But that's pretty incredible. And like you said, maybe comes with a little bit of signature. And I feel like drums especially like you said, Shannon Larkin, different people, when they play them, you could really hear it. He actually played on one of my favorite Glassjaw records, bringing it back to my upbringing on Long Island. So I love that dude. He's an amazing drummer. So you start playing with Mark, and Mark, you feel like is kind of pushing the level. When did it kind of feel like, you know what, like we're becoming a band, like this is the thing, we're going to do a thing?
I don't know. And again, you know, even going back to what you just said, there is something a bit magical about not knowing what you're doing. And I always told my mom, I was like, Mom, she's like, you know, I'm hearing you play, it's amazing. And, you know, I hear from all these other people, you know, the reviews start coming in. She's like, it's just incredible, like what you're doing with it. I was like, Mom, here's the thing. I have no fucking idea what I'm doing. None at all. I am really motivated to be good at this, but I have no talent. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I'm just hearing this thing in my head, and then I will sit there for 8 hours until I can get my body to do it. Whereas my brother, I felt like he actually has a tremendous amount of talent and maybe not quite as much motivation, but that's how it kind of worked together. So I don't know. Back to your question, how does that play out? Who knows? It's an ongoing adventure. I think I'd be worse off if I knew what I'm doing, because I would try to tell myself that maybe I shouldn't do that, or that's not the right way. Or I think there is, I know that's a bit ignorant, but I do think there is a bit of freedom in not really pretending to think there is a right way.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's true. And also do the things that work for you, right? Like, not the constant, like, this is the professional way or the good way or whatever that means, right? Like, I don't think that that necessarily exists. And you're like a great example of just that, and doing that sort of stuff. So as you were kind of, you know, developing the band with Mark and you know, bringing this all together, when did it feel like, you know, Borne the Priest was starting to do stuff?
Sorry, I apologize. That's kind of where it was going. It never felt like that.
Oh, okay.
It never felt like, oh, we've got something really great going on, and I think we can do something with it. It was constantly like, are we having a good time? Is this the heaviest possible thing we could write right now in this dude's basement that's letting us rent it for a couple hours tonight? Like, that was it. That really was it. And then people started showing up to hear us practice. Then we started getting invited to parties. Then, okay, yeah, we'll play that club or whatever. But it was really nothing more than that. So much so that even while things were progressing to that point where we were playing like the cool guys party and the cool club in town, Mark decided, hey, you know what? I'm not feeling this. I'm going to go to grad school in Chicago. And he left for 2 years.
Oh.
So,
wow, I did not know that.
Okay. Yeah, it was just like, we're just this group of friends and we're doing it and it's fun, but we weren't sitting in the back room trying to, you know, email record labels or any of that stuff. There was nothing like that going on at the time. So Mark left. I was still having fun playing with John. John knew a guy named Abe Spear, who came in and played guitar. Talented guitar player, not quite Mark Morton, but talented guy. And we kept on for a while. And Abe Spear was good friends with a guy named Randy. And we knew Randy because Randy was the guy that hung out near the dorms while we were there, and you know, helped some of the kids in the dorms find things that they're probably not supposed to find. So we knew of him, and then Abe brought him in. We did have some singer auditions before that for no purpose other than, why not have a singer? Even though my intent to begin with was to always remain instrumental. There's a great history of Richmond instrumental bands, and I just love that whole thing. You know, bands like Breadwinner, if you get a chance to check that out.
Sick. I love Breadwinner.
Right. And those were the shows that we were going to. So that was like, that's the shit. Like, that's what we want to do. That's it. So I was a little hesitant on the singer. But the first person that we had come in was a girl that I actually grew up with in high school. Her name was Alicia, and she was great. But Abe was really insisting on this guy, Randy. And while I don't think any of us knew what Randy was saying or singing, or any of us really thought he was particularly good. Randy just never left our rehearsal space. So every time we went, we just had to deal with Randy. You know, I don't think Randy was ever actually asked to join the band. He just stayed.
It's like George Costanza when he gets fired from his job and he was just like, Jerry, I'm just going to show up.
Right. Yeah, pretty much that. And I don't mean, clearly, I don't mean to diminish Randy's role in any of this. None of us would be where we are without each other. But it was an interesting time. It was funny. But that's how unplanned the whole thing was.
Sure. And so it just seems like a community of people kind of coming together and figuring this out. One thing I wanted to ask you, as you're developing this, like, you know, we charted some of the earlier influences, but as your music making started to progress, maybe you got more comfortable in your drumming role and stuff like that. What were the things that, you know, you mentioned Breadwinner as something that was kind of shaping your taste. What are a couple other things that we might know that you were like, maybe not on the Walkman, but the CD player at the time?
Right. My first couple CDs. Who knows? I know I got really heavy into. Oh, of course, I'm into. Megadeth is always. I'm always going to tell you that's my favorite band in the world.
Sure.
That just from the initial impact of what that did to my life, that is just. They're going to be number one all the time. But I got into Metallica and Testament, kind of the highway of thrash metal there, pretty much everybody involved. And at the time, of course, I remember going to the record stores and stuff where you couldn't listen to things at the time, but if the record cover looked really cool, you know, that was kind of good enough. And you kind of, you know, taking bets on if it was going to be any good. Most of them weren't, but got into Sacred Reich. And then I started listening to more stuff like Mr. Bungle and Mahavishnu Orchestra. And then strangely, right along that same time, got really into the Police. And I still think Stuart Copeland is one of the best drummers that's ever been. What I loved about Stuart, and this was at the time that I was really starting to develop my playing and hearing what I was doing that was different and trying to figure out what that was other than being left-handed. And what I think it was the drummers that I admired, like Shannon Larkin, like Gene Hoglan. These were guys that were bringing something, like Stuart Copeland, bringing something into the project that was really unique of the project itself. And it wasn't necessarily their fault. It was their influences or the way they played. Maybe they were left-handed too. I don't know. But if you take any one of those guys out of those bands just aren't the same. And like Gene, for example, who's a friend of mine, you know, I first time I got to sit down with Gene, I was like a kid in a candy store. I was like, how do you do this stuff, man? It's just so incredible. He's like, well, I'll tell you, honestly, he's like, when I was a kid, I took funk drumming lessons, but then I got really into metal. And so I took all that stuff I learned from funk and just sped it up. And that's why you've never heard it before. It's just like, what? Okay, now I get it. And Stuart Copeland, who's just kind of this punk rock drummer in a reggae band. It's like that. How does that ever make sense? But it was beautiful, man. And so those are the things that I was starting to take away, where I didn't want to study how to play every Nick Menza beat or Lars beat or Dave Lombardo. You know, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to listen to the Police and figure out what is that little combination right there, and how could I bring that into kind of what we're doing and make it sound really heavy.
That's amazing. And I think that also gives, you know, it's a perspective that, you know, you have to have. It's sort of like, you know, we don't want to walk the same path. We want to seek what those people sought, right? Like the musicians, they were after a bigger ideal. It's not just in the technique of the playing. It's the context of the drumming and what that meant to the project. And it's, I did one of these recently with Sebastian from Baroness, and he was talking about Stuart Copeland and just how he could do very small flourishes and how that would just propel the song forward in such a way that was very inspiring to him as well. So I think Stuart's had. I'm seeing a common thread amongst a couple of drummers in the scene.
Yeah,
but,
it's global for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And you could also see, like, and with heavy music, I mean, I Hate God talks about the Meters being one of their favorite bands of all time. So if you want some groove, man, I mean, that's a pretty good place to get it, right?
No doubt, no doubt.
Absolutely. So, as you guys are doing Burn the Priest and stuff of that nature, you know, I feel like the band just kind of kept getting groovier and heavier and groovier and heavier. What was just the kind of the progression of the band? Was it always trying to find the next heavy thing for you guys, or how did the songwriting go there?
I don't think there was at the time. I don't think there was a very good. We all loved very much the same music. Mark and I especially were big fans of the band Trouble. And we all loved all the thrash stuff and all that. But I think the Burn the Priest was really, in so much as the name was clearly a bit of a gimmick, I think the whole thing was kind of like, we are just going to be, you know, write the best riffs we can, but we want to be, it's heavy, so subjective, but I think at the very start, it was just fast. We want to be fast. And then I think I was a little bit ahead of the curve as far as listening to different metal stuff that was coming out. When I first heard Contradictions Collapse by Meshuggah, I was like, okay, hold on, time out. Like, yeah. And that fit in very well to the instrumental kind of music that I was loving locally, like Breadwinner, and maybe not instrumental, but a band from very close to here called Confessor, who were doing this just mind-melding, very, what's now called kind of math metal kind of stuff. But it seemed, you know, I made friends with Steve Shelton from Confessor. I got to sit behind him at shows a couple times, and it was just, he was not counting anything, you know. This was just like, he was feeling it, and you know, the guy's playing in like jeans and whatever. It's just, and I was just like, what is happening? It was amazing to see that happen. So those kind of things kind of propelled the heavy sound a little bit into maybe slowing it down and let, not like I Hate God slow it down, but slow it down and let like the And Justice for All speed like hit for a little bit, and then of course, you know, blast it back up, but have those moments of some variation in what we were doing. And that was also a big part of, as my listening experience was growing and expanding with other like Billy Cobham, another drummer, like listening to these guys that were doing these kind of variations in their playing, like we were talking about with Stuart. I started hearing it in the music that I really liked. There's just these dynamics where it's not kind of in the red all the time, which makes it, when it goes into the red, a very special moment. And that was just kind of it was a fairly swift learning curve, but we seemed to adapt to it pretty well, and everybody had clearly the ability to kind of jump on board.
Yeah, and that's really cool, because to me at that time, like when you listen to something like Meshuggah, and I love Meshuggah so much, and it's very interesting because I feel like a lot of American bands, like you Coalesce, Dillinger Escape Plan, like all these bands, like really took them in. Like over here, it wasn't really metal as much as like almost like hardcore, and they didn't want to play it so straight, basically, you know. And I would say Igor Cavalera as well, with his sort of polyrhythmic stuff coming more from a South American influence, really fucking amazing and really changing the landscape of kind of the grooves you would hear in metal, right? Like, and to me, you guys are right on the cusp of all that stuff happening, and then of course with, you know, continuing that in Lamb of God and what that sort of ended up becoming. So I feel like Burn the Priest, you know, you guys put out how many records? 5, 6?
Burn the Priest? No. Originally there was only, well, we did 2 7-inches and then a full length.
Sorry, yeah, with the 7 inches, the full length, yeah, that's right. So it was,
and then
pretty
we did a covers record in 2018, just as kind of bringing it back.
Yeah, I saw that, and I was like, wow, I only heard a cover or two, and I didn't know it was a full record until like a couple of days ago. I was like, yo, this is great. So that was really cool. So that was my treat in doing a little bit of homework for this. So tell me a little bit about the sort of the demise of Borne the Priest and then going into Lamb of God, which is obviously your biggest body of work at the time.
Right. So there wasn't really, that was a pretty big struggle for us because we had gotten to the point, and this was right towards the end of 1999, Mark had come back from college or grad school, sorry, from Chicago. And I was very interested in getting Mark back in the band because now I was starting to see, even without Mark in the band, we had started to branch out. We had started to tour. We were playing in Chicago. We were playing in Philly. We were playing in Detroit. We were playing in New York. Now the band's moving around. It's not just us with our friends in John's basement. So things are happening. I was interested in pursuing this. And I think everybody was to some extent, but we're really still pretty young. Everybody's working at bars or working on a roof. Kind of, I don't know where life's going to take me, but sure, why not? If Chris has this idea, let's just see where it goes. So Mark comes back into the band, and really soon after that, I think we were playing up in Philadelphia, and it might have even been a show with Dillinger Escape Plan at a place called Stalag 13. And several labels had come to check it out. And this was, I think, Century Media and Relapse. Gosh, who else?
Ferret, maybe Ferret?
I'm not sure if Ferret was there in 99, maybe. But there was another company called Prosthetic, which was an imprint off of Metal Blade. And we met the guys, EJ and Dan, and I was really into Relapse. I really wanted to be on Nuclear Blast. I think a lot of the stuff that I was really into, listening to at the time and following the catalog, was Nuclear Blast stuff. And so that was kind of my goal. And I think Century Media offered us something. I was starting to get into a band called Pissing Razors that they had at the time.
Texas.
Yeah. But EJ and Dan from Prosthetic really made a good case, really had at the time, we didn't know what a record deal was, but it seemed a lot more realistic to us in what we hope to accomplish. And so they offered this record label to Borne the Priest. And I think it was Mark initially who said, okay, here's the deal. Like, I've come back, I've joined the band, seems to be going well. We have this opportunity on the table. Who knows where it's going to go? Most bands, all bands fall apart. But, if this is something that we want to do, like together, maybe we should kind of ditch the gimmick name. Like where is that really going to take us? And I think everyone was just like, what? Including the record label, who then at the time was like, the deal's off. Like, if you change the name, like, you just spent the last 6 years busting your ass under this name. Why would you do this when I hand you a piece of paper? And I think Mark had in the end, a great point in that at this point in our lives, it's silly to look back on the whole thing starting as a gimmick. Like, what is something, it doesn't have to be a gimmick or something that we have to totally get behind, but not something where it's like, kids will love it and parents will hate it kind of thing. Like, what is something a bit ambiguous? What is something, what initially the question was, well, what could possibly be heavier than Borne the Priest? Like, what is a heavier name than that?
That's a great question. I'm struggling with it right now.
There was no answer. And Mark, and his strange kind of woodsy wisdom, came up with this name, Lamb of God. And it was just like, well, I mean, you can't flip the coin any harder than that. Okay. So, yeah, so we just went with that. There was no spiritual meeting in the woods or anything like that. It was just like, yeah, okay, that's great. The record label hated it. They did not want us to do that. It was a struggle, but they agreed to it. I think they may have changed the terms a little bit, but I don't think it was a big deal. And that's kind of where that whole thing started.
Wow. So that's pretty amazing, because I know it was like, you know, pretty much same group of people. I was like, why is this line of demarcation here? You know what I mean? Like, I didn't really know why exactly that happened. And that's really funny, but that's so being true to yourself, right? Like, hey, you know what? I want to represent myself in a different way. And like 6 years ago, I mean, you know, talk to anyone who was 20 and then 26 or 27, they're like different people, right? So even what you guys wanted to kind of put out there from like an aesthetic and a vibe. So it seems like at this point too, it started like pretty chill, right? Like we're all just homies hanging out, playing music, really committing to doing so. But like, it seemed like people had other priorities, right? There was a grad school thing. There was all this other stuff happening. But now, you know, bands are more than just playing music, right? There's aesthetics involved. There's commitment, time commitment, all of this. So was this the first time that you feel like, okay, we got to strap in, we got something going on here, and like we're going to push it to the max?
Well, it was, because now we had the opportunity right away. We got the opportunity to tour with our very good friends from home. Sorry, on my phone, just trying to get it plugged in.
No, okay.
So as soon as we signed on to Prosthetic, who again was a subsidiary of Metal Blade, who at the time were working with War, and who we knew, and I would sit down at the Village Cafe here in Richmond with Dave Rocky, and he would offer advice. He's like, and I remember sitting down with Dave and him telling me, we were still Burn the Priest, he's like, you guys need to commit to this. He's like, I see you guys as the future of metal, like way beyond anything that we've ever done. You guys have the future of metal in your hands. You've got to figure out how to do this. So they took us out on our first tour. And so now it was like really real. Not only did we have this contract, which, you know, it wasn't a whole lot of money, but it was more than any of us had been paid for doing anything. We didn't have anything left after we bought the van and recorded the record, but it was still, you know, a nice little chunk of change at the time. And so they took us out on tour, and now it's like, oh shit, like we're not playing like a party. Like this is like a professional club with like bartenders and shit. Like, you know, like it was a huge step up. And going around to, God, what's the name of it? I remember there's one place in Jersey that had a big airbrush thing of Sebastian Bach on the wall. I'll always remember that. Starland? Not Starland. Whatever it was. Yeah. God, what was that place? I don't know. I love that place. But that was kind of when it hit me. It's like, yeah, this is it, man. This is the shit. Like, I want to do this. And I think it was us, Amen, and Guar on that tour. And it went on for an enormous amount of time. I think it was like 8.5 weeks. And it was pretty brutal living in the band with the 5 dudes. But it was great.
Yeah.
And that is when I think it hit everybody. It's even through the disgusting times and disappointments and hunger and pain on that tour. I think that's when it hit everybody. Like, this is way better than sitting at home.
Oh yeah.
Like, we should try and do this. And when I say we should try and do this, nothing actually changed about what we were doing. We were just ready to accept whatever next offer came in. We did a bunch of crazy tours. I mean, 18 Visions, like whatever came up, we're like, yep, let's do it. Let's go.
Got it.
And
so just ready to be active at like any given time. And like Rocky said, like commit. It's pretty incredible to have like a legendary guy, RIP to Dave, like a true legend of the game, come to you and tell you that you guys are the future of not only your own scene, but the larger thing. Someone who's seen it all at that time, right? That must have been like, okay, fuck.
It impacts me now. Yeah, I mean, that's why I remember that competition. It was awesome. And, you know, that was motivation enough for me to, and now I say this like I jumped ship or something, but I didn't actually stop working full time at my job until about the middle of 2005. And that was about 3 years after everybody else did. And I had a pretty good gig. I was an IT director at a local shop for the college here. I had been there for 10 years. I was like tenured in the position. I was making 60 grand a year. Like, it made no sense for me to leave. Health benefits, the whole thing. I just bought a house. It was like, man, I'm like, my life is in front of me. I just got married. It was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I'm going to go on tour for $200 a night with Guar for the rest of my life. Like, dude, you gotta, like, come on. But in my head, I knew that like this leap was coming. And I think it was because of really the release of Ashes of the Wake on Epic, and going through that struggle to get out from under Prosthetic onto Epic, then having us immediately onto Ozfest. It was just like that was really, I think, probably the point where everybody realized, like, if we do what we do well and take care of ourselves, and still have fun but take it seriously, instead of us thinking like this is just a joke and who really cares, like I think we could make a career out of this.
Yeah, and that's incredible. And could I ask you how old you were at that time when you were kind of making those decisions?
When I quit work, that was in 2005. Let me do some shitty math. Wow. Man, that doesn't sound right. So, yeah, wow. So I'm 32.
32 years old and ready to give that up. That's incredible, man. Like, because I think for a lot of people, it's like this super crossroads, right? And for people who are out there who are artists themselves, or thinking about doing different things, and like at what time, certain things become available to you, like, don't think that, oh man, I didn't do anything at, 26, right, and like, let's throw it in.
But even hearing that come out of my own mouth, it's almost like that's kind of the time when most people kind of give it up.
That's what I'm saying.
You know what I mean? Right.
Yeah, but you're here like making this big decision because you also, like you said, you saw it coming, but you were willing to take the risk. And I think it's a really inspiring thing because, for a lot of people, maybe success comes a little bit quicker, maybe it doesn't, or, you age differently, but then you guys pretty much became the face of heavy music and this sort of like new wave of American metal that, was being sort of pushed at the time. What did it feel like when you started kind of being brought into this larger conversation of just like, we're part of this new American, metal scene coming up, and like Lamb of God is like kind of riding the crest of that wave? Was that something that you were just like, holy shit, this now I'm on another plane now. I'm on Ozfest. This shit's happening. We're on Epic.
For me, and I there's several guys in the band that are very, very competitive guys. I would say John being the most. Like, he doesn't like losing, getting to go to the bathroom first in the morning. Like, he's a very competitive guy. I was not so much that, but in my head, that whole thing, and I remember that whole new wave of American heavy metal, kind of journalistic term. I missed that whole thing because I was too in the middle of it. And I don't mean to say that I was interested in it or anything else, but I was, and of course they all became good friends. But at the time, we are trying to surpass these bands that are included in that class, right? So my focus is on like, why are we not selling as many records as Killswitch? Why is God Forbid not selling as many records as we are? Why are we on par with Shadows Fall? That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I was competitive very much in that nature. So I was kind of in the little too much in the trees there to see that forest that was happening.
And that's really interesting because, like you said, yeah, you're in the middle of it. It's like, I'm like sitting here watching the game, you're in the game, and the camera angle is way different when you're the first person, versus like the third person view. And for me, I just thought it was so fucking cool because I'm sitting there, I'm like, these are the motherfuckers from Burn the Priest. This is dope. And I was just like, I heard the first couple of Lamb of God records and I was like, oh, all right, cool. I get where they're going with this. And again, I like Meshuggah and Coalesce and like things of that nature, Dillinger and stuff. And I love the signatures, the groove, everything you guys are bringing into it with a little bit more of a Southern personality to it and maybe laid back kind of vibe to it. And I was like, oh, cool. Love it. like super cool. I got it right away. But to see that and just know the road, like we're talking about, you know, a really long time of playing music. You're 32 now. We started this show when you were like 10, you know, and like this is 22 years of development. And I know that it sounds kind of some of those things are happenstance and different things like that, but like it got you to that point, and that's something I think important to share to people, you know, in the world. Like this could happen to you depending on your drive and what you want to do with things and how things unfold for you.
And I think a very good thing to add to that was the difference in the personalities that we had, because had I had carte blanche on the whole thing, I'm pretty sure we would have sounded a lot like Fear Factory or Meshuggah, or a very kind of industrial kind of metal, because that's really kind of where that's what I was listening to, that's what I was pushing. I felt like metal to be perfect had to be this rigid, computerized, perfect thing. Not that I wanted it to go into the computer. In fact, the first time we did that, I was scared to death. I love going to tape. I wanted to play it like that, like actually do it like that, you know. So, but it was always Mark that came back with, like what you're saying, kind of that groove and that bit of Southern thing that he had. And, you know, he always drew me back into the conversation, you know, when we'd start talking about Trouble or something like that. It's like, well, how heavy is that fucking Trouble song? Like, yeah, that Meshuggah song is fucking heavy as shit. But how about this Trouble song? It's like, oh yeah, that is pretty fucking heavy as shit. So to have the round table and not be, you know, the one guy, I think was really, really important to our evolution.
Totally. It's like, you know, like anything good, it's not the sum of its parts. It's what it like kind of creates together and building. Right. And, you know, these are long relationships, right? Like we've been playing with the same people for a long time at this point, right? And we're not even like halfway through the records that you made with Lamb of God. And to get sort of tighter and to play with people for a long time, do you feel like, okay, this is our, you know, third record or so, like out with the group, but you have all this behind you. What was it like kind of just, you know, refreshing things and finding the new kind of like songwriting and iteration as you're going through like Lamb of God? Because I feel like there was a cool progression as you guys kept going, you know, and that's not.
Yeah, I think, no, it's not. And I think we challenged ourselves. I think there was, you know, constantly a bit of, it may be self-induced, but there was a pressure to, you know, how are we going to do something, you know, better than that? Even after the first Lamb of God record, or even after the first Burn the Priest record, it's like, well, that's pretty much everything we knew how to do. How are we supposed to do better than that in 2 years? So, you know, it's that constant battle of trying to do that. But we all enjoyed very much the writing process. I mean, it did become more and more tedious, because I remember, like on New American Gospel, when we were to record that, when we would rehearse for that album, we would rehearse, everything was so fucking loud. I remember I had these like big chunks of metal on my kick drums just so I could hear them. And when we went to record that album with Steve Austin, I remember when Willie and Mark were tracking the guitars, Steve was listening to them playing the parts, and he's like, you guys aren't even playing the same. Are you supposed to be playing the same riff right there? Yeah. It's just the verse, right? It just goes like this. And they're looking at each other like, no, it doesn't go like that. It doesn't go like that. We were just so blaring it out that no one knew. So it got very meticulous, clearly, as we went on, as to what and how, all that stuff. So it got, maybe that squeezed a little bit of the fun out of it, but it was also a new challenge to do it that way. And clearly we got better at learning each other and being able to write in that fashion where you could actually hear each other. And
oh, wait.
The
so
song
hearing each other while you're playing music, very important, kids. You don't need to turn everything up to 12. That's
pro tip. Pro tip.
That's awesome. So let me ask you a question. With the meticulousness, like you sort of said, and you guys bringing that, did that come with like a new situation, like a better practice space, you know, advances in recording, doing stuff at home? How did that sort of happen?
Man, oh, better practice space. That's hilarious. So we had the same. We did rent. Finally, got out of our friend John Parton's basement and rented a. It was upstairs at some right next to an auto dealership. Whatever. We got some stuff stolen out of there, so we moved to another place, and then they bought the building, and then we moved to another place where we wrote Ashes of the Wake and Sacrament. And we're talking about a 15 by 15 room, wood paneled, like a dentist office from the 70s.
Sick.
And there was like 20 other bands in there. And, you know, here we are on Epic writing Sacrament with Machine sitting in there, you know, producing. And it was like, I don't know, $150 a month or something like that. So we never upgraded all that stuff. It was just us like really paying attention now to like really fine details.
Dude, that's awesome though. But in a way, that's cool. It kind of keeps it gritty and the motivation high, and to like, you know, the late great Marvin Hagler, one of the best boxers, says it's hard to wake up when you're in silk sheets. You know, you got to go in and you just got to put in the work and keep writing and
right.
trying to progress, right? So
right, it's like the Rocky III story, right?
I love that.
So
I love that.
Right, and it was. I think that really did help us, and it wasn't like, oh man, I can't wait to go into that dingy rehearsal space. It was like, this place fucking sucks. So we're here to get something done. Let's fucking do it, you know? And so we would just, and there were times, man, we'd spend 8-10 hours a day in that place, you know, just working things back and forth. Technology did help a bit when we got the ability to let go of our own ego about everything. So we would write these songs and then call a producer in later to come. And like, unfortunately for Devin Townsend and unfortunately for Machine on initial meeting, we really were very hesitant to listen to anything they had to say. Like, we didn't know really the difference between a producer and an engineer. So we wanted to sound like Soilwork, but we don't really care about any of your ideas. And that really was basically the message that was given to Devin Townsend when he came to see us. And I think once we got over that, and I think that happened very succinctly with a song called Now You've Got Something to Die For, which was written, all the parts are there, but the arrangement was very different. The bit, you know, Now You've Got Something to Die For, that happened once in the song, the way we originally wrote it. And Machine was like, you know, guys, you're like, you've shut me down on everything. Like, let me play with this one song. Like, I'm telling you, if you do this part more than once, it's gonna be great. So we let him have it. It was almost like a parting gift, you know. And then we saw exactly what happened. And when we went back to him, we're like, oh, dude, we got to do this next record with you, which turned out to be Sacrament. He was like, hell no. He's like, I am not working with you guys. You're way too particular. You're headstrong. You think, you know, that nobody knows better than you. And I don't really want to be involved. And it took a lot of convincing to bring him on board and say, like, no, listen, we really appreciate what we learned from that lesson. And you will be the sixth member. You're not going to outvote anybody, but you have as much of a vote as anybody else does. So.
Wow, that's a big thing too, and it's funny, you know, because sometimes, like, you know, we were saying about, like, you've been with the same group of people for a long time, right? And so you have tendencies, you write in certain ways, you got to know each other, and like any other relationship, there becomes a familiarity, and when you're making art, you kind of have to shake that up. Do you feel like Machine helped you guys shake that up and then create better work?
It did, and that was a big thing. Exactly what you just said was a big thing in our progression, where I really pushed. Everybody loved working with Steve Austin, who did the Burn the Priest record and the New American Gospel, and I still love Steve Austin. He's a great guy. But I really pushed, not because of anything Steve did or didn't do. I said, you know, listen, we've done 2 records. We've got to go somewhere else. We're going to get comfortable here. It's going to be, everybody's going to just be like, oh, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's the same as it was last time. Yeah, it's great. Still great. Still great. So I just wanted to push. And I, you know, was really reaching for the stars at that point with Devin Townsend. And no, I don't think anybody in the band even knew who he was at that time. But Devin came out to see us when we played Vancouver. We hung out with him for a while. Everybody listened to some of the stuff he had done, listened to some of the production stuff he had done, and got on board with that idea. After that, I don't know how happy Devin was about that, because we were even worse to him than we were to Machine.
Oh, come on.
Being particular.
I thought we learned, bro.
No. So Devin was before Machine.
Oh, okay. So then you finally
so
learned.
After Devin, I was like, well, we got to do it again. And then the record label came in and was like, listen, we want to send you to work with Bob Rock. and we're going to send you to Hawaii for like 8 weeks. And we were like, hell no. Like, that is the worst idea. It sounds like, you know, swimsuit issue kind of heavy metal band story, but it was like, no, dude, we cannot do that. That we are just going to, we're never going to get anything done. And there's no way this is going to work out with Bob Rock, who, you know, incredibly prolific producer, but it didn't make any sense to kind of where we were going with it, nor did we think he'd understand what was going to, something would have broken horribly in that relationship.
Yeah, for sure.
So then they recommended this guy, Machine, who had done some stuff, nothing really on our radar very much, but he sent me some like real industrial kind of drum and bass stuff that he had been doing in England. And I think he actually worked with some production elements on a Prodigy record or something. And I was just like, that's it, you know, it's not Andy Sneap. I think those were the choices at the time, or at least in my head. I was like, let's do something outside the box here. Like, let's go really outside the box. This is not a metal producer. Let's see what this guy can make. Can he help us not sound like Kill Switch and Shadows Fall, God forbid, and everything that was coming out? Not necessarily shaping the songs, but sonically.
Definitely. And that's like going back to even with your playing. And I feel like that's a common theme here is like, you're not pursuing like one analogous sound, but you're pursuing an musical ideal that you kind of keep shooting for, and then you kind of find the pieces to try and get to that ideal. And I think that's an important, you know, thing for good artists and good art, and anyone out here who's listening to this and making that is like, don't try and be like Chris one-to-one. Try and seek what they saw. Try and go higher. You know what I mean? And try and figure stuff out. And I think that honestly, we already saw what Machine did, you know, by bringing, you know, you guys into it. And also, I like hooky Lamb of God. When it got more hooky, when it became that, I was like, they're going all the way, and this fucking rocks. I'm like, I'm down with it, you know? And I'm like, I think it just brought more power to the band, and I think you guys got the dynamics that you had been searching for even since Burn the Priest. Like you said, if everything's in the red all the time, you start losing impact, right? Do you think Machine teased that out even more of you guys and brought you to that new level?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's actually where we kind of refined that whole idea and swallowed it really in our heads, where it doesn't have to be hardest, fastest, heaviest all the time. In fact, it might be harder, faster, and heavier if it's not all the time.
That's restraint. It's hard to be restrained, you know, especially when you're making something so heavy, you know, and that's a really great kind of like lesson in and of itself. So we've been going through Lamb of God. Things are going incredibly well, right? You guys are, you know, riding this wave. You're now making records with Machine. Those are breaking awesome. You're feeling good. I got to ask about the Megadeth thing, because we almost started at Megadeth, right? And now we're having the real full circle moment. We went from the tape to the practice space with Dave Mustaine, right? So this is really an incredible thing for you. And now I'm understanding that because of, you know, what you spoke about before. Tell me about what it was like just getting this call about potentially playing with, you know, one of your heroes.
Well, I think I'm going to leave you with a cliffhanger. We might have to do a part 2 here, because I got to jump into some homework assignments with the kids.
Sure. All right, cool. So we can do.
But I will tell you this. I'm in LA. I'm recording drums for, was this Resolution? Maybe it was Wrath. And I get a call. We had been on tour in 2005 with Megadeth. And I get a call really early in the morning, like 6 in the morning. And it is Dave Mustaine's guitar tech, a guy named Willie G, who I became good friends with along the tour, great guy. And Willie's like, hey, your phone's going to ring in about 5 minutes, and you should answer it. I'm like, okay, sure. And phone rings in 5 minutes, and it's Dave. And Dave's like, hey, you know, enjoyed touring with you. Good chat now and then. He's not a particularly social guy on tour, but we did hang out a couple times for breakfast or whatever. And he's like, but there's a lot of people that I really trust that tell me you're somebody that I think I should be talking to right now, and I'd really like to go back and make a pretty sick thrash record, and I'm interested in having you be a part of that if you'd like to be. And I was like, I mean, it was a candid camera kind of moment, like, am I on fucking, is something happening? Like, this was, it really was the band that changed my life, and now I'm having a phone call that's about to change my life again. So I'm sorry to do it to you, but
no,
I gotta jump into
that's
some.
a great way to leave it off, and I love it. And Chris, just thank you for your time. Go hang out with the
You're
kids. And Chris has a new band called Borne. Check them out because that's what he's been doing lately. And we'll have to do this again sometime. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for hanging in there with all the tech difficulties.
No, that was probably on my end. I appreciate it.
All right, awesome, man. Have a great night. Take care, guys.
You as well.
Peace.
Take care.